Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about World Stranding. And I'm going to give an example of why World Stranding is happening, but is clearly not understood by all participants who are doing World Stranding to Dungeons and Dragons. So today I'm going to talk about an example of World Stranding that is not stranding a world to Dungeons and Dragons, but is clearly World Stranding between two products, and it is outrageous. It is the one of the most strongest examples of what is happening on Dungeons and Dragons, but it's just shockingly clear on this example. And I really appreciate your patience. I understand that no one else on the internet is talking about World Stranding. So I'll define my terms here real quick. So World Stranding is a new modern occurrence, okay? And it's when two different companies so what is the bare minimum to do World Stranding? You have to have two companies, okay? They have to own intellectual properties. You have to have two distinct companies. They have to own two distinct intellectual properties, and contained within each one of those intellectual properties, there needs to be a world on each side, a distinct world that has been illustrated, air quotes, in multiple ways, right, to the public. And that could have been done in a television show, in a video game, different ways, right, that the worlds have been illustrated to the public. Okay, all right, so that's the bare minimum. You have to have that. Okay, now so I'm defining World Stranding. What is World Stranding? First of all, I think this is my term. I think I coined this term and this concept, right? And I didn't invent doing World Stranding. What I'm doing is I am defining the language to identify it and talk about it. Okay, because it was happening, and this is one of the things too. How did this start happening? Well, World Stranding happens from the nexus, the connection of, because you're dealing with a company, creatives and suits, right? So the suits control the money, the creatives control the content, okay? And then that interacts with the communities that receive these worlds, okay? So that's World Stranding. Okay? Now, what I'm saying is that World Stranding is happening on Dungeons & Dragons right now. It is the World Stranding that is happening on Dungeons & Dragons, all of that is my humble opinion, and I'm going to continue to give you my humble opinion on what World Stranding is. And I'm setting it here so that the communities so that the Dungeons & Dragons community will understand World Stranding and will begin interacting with World Stranding to accomplish Dungeons & Dragons community goals with World Stranding. Okay, all right. So let's keep going here. All right. So let's get into this. All right. So what I'm saying is that on Dungeons and Dragons, you have a situation, okay, where World Stranding has been happening for a while, and it's happening specifically, okay, from the perspective. The reason it's happening is it's happening from the creation of content, okay, and the momentum of capitalism. And it specifically happens between a lack of knowledge. Now, this may end at some point, but we're definitely here now. And this video is speaking about this lack of knowledge, this ignorance on the parts of some of the participants in World Stranding, okay, who are literally executing World Stranding, okay. All right, so let's get into this. So essentially, Dungeons & Dragons has stranded. It has created strands connecting figurative strings, right? And in some cases, quite literal physical strings, right? To from one world to another, okay? And they do it specifically through products, generally, okay? Yeah. Actually, physical objects and products. And you're like, why are you making that distinction there? We'll get there. Not in this video, but eventually. All right. Okay. let's talk about the most severe example I've ever seen of world stranding, demonstrating the ignorance of people who are actually executing world stranding. Okay, so let's get into this, right? So taking one world and connecting it to another world. All right. Okay, here we go. All right. Oh, and by the way, on Dungeons and Dragons, this has already happened where some of the creatives who are doing world stranding 100% understand what they're doing, but others, but the suits are completely ignorant of the world stranding that is happening and the ramifications of the world stranding that is happening. Okay, all right, and I've never seen a clearer example of this than what I'm about to tell you. All right. So Dungeons and Dragons, a perfect example is Dungeons and Dragons, and then Warhammer 40K, right? So there is a strand between Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer 40K, a world strand, okay? But it contains the ignorance of the creatives and some of the creatives and some of the suits. So some of the creatives in Dungeons and Dragons who work on Dungeons and Dragons, who write the copy, create the promotion, create the packaging, create the narrative, create the lore that's communicated on websites, short stories, and actually create the product, are 100% aware of what world stranding is. Some of the creatives have no idea of what a world strand is, right? A connection between two worlds, in two distinct companies, in two distinct intellectual properties, in two distinct worlds. And then when you connect that from, on the one side, to Dungeons and Dragons, what does Dungeons and Dragons do? That's where the ramifications come in, right? This has been done forever. Like you put your IP on a towel and people use it to dry themselves, right? But primarily, what Dungeons and Dragons does is tell stories, right? So if you connect a world to it, logically, every dungeon master who ever picks up the D&D Essentials kit and beyond will run stories with the worlds that you connected to Dungeons and Dragons. That's logical. And it seems fair too, in my humble opinion. Right? Okay. All right. So let's go. Thanks for your patience. Let's get there. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the absolute most clear example I've ever seen of this. All right. So first of all, if you ain't watching, if you're watching, are you watching Atlanta? Donald Glover is a genius. Not everybody's aware of this. He is, right? Well, a lot of people think Donald Glover is XYZ, right? So Donald Glover stars in Atlanta. He also starred in Community. He is the rapper Childish Gambino. So he's an actor, he's a rapper, he's a creator, he's a producer, he's a lot of things, okay? But first and foremost, and one thing you need to really realize about him is he is an absolute stark raving genius, okay? He is incredibly smart, okay? And if you're watching Atlanta, you realize that he is doing something on Atlanta that has never been done on any show ever, okay? It has the shape of a sitcom, but it's not even remotely a sitcom. I would call it a philosophicon, right? It is philosophy comedy, right? Like rom-com, romantic comedy. Atlanta is a philosophicon. It's a philosophicom. It's a philosophicom. It's philosophy mixed with comedy, and the mix is like 90-10, and 90% is the philosophy. Okay, it is incredibly deep. Okay, all right. Like we love this. We used to say mom watching. My wife will like walk through a room and see 10 seconds of a show and make a comment on it, right? Which is always fun because like you know, like my son watches One Piece. You know, it has 800 episodes, and he might be on episode 400. You know, like, and you know, she'll make a comment on it, and like he'll laugh because he's like, well, I got to explain. I got to do 20 minutes of explanation for you to understand where we are in the show, you know? And, but others will, you know, other people in my family will walk through the, you know, room while I'm watching Atlanta, and they're like, what's happening? And like, this, you know, because it's just so odd. And if you don't know what you're seeing, you have no hope of understanding what Donald Glover is doing. It's incredible, okay? So, season 4, episode 9, there are spoilers for Atlanta here, of Atlanta, talks about the goof who stood by the door. And what it is, the episode is an alternate history of Disney, the company, and specifically a CEO of Disney that never existed. So get this. Season 4, episode 9 of Atlanta is a mockumentary. It's not a real documentary. It's a mockumentary. It's a documentary that is mocking. That's just one thing it's doing. Disney, right? And Disney's relationship with African Americans. Okay, so it's a mockumentary about a CEO that Disney never had. Okay, but it doesn't talk about Disney by saying Drisney. It says Disney and Disney CEO and the Goofy movie. Okay, so it literally name checks Disney itself, Disney employees. All right, it doesn't literally name check Disney employees. It does name check Disney literal roles at the company, literal Disney roles, and the literal Goofy movie, right? And it is both an alternate history and a mockumentary about Disney. Okay, and so what does Donald Glover do? He blatantly mocks Disney to its face, right? And says this about Disney and that about Disney and this about Disney and that about Disney, all which are outrageously brutal against Disney and put Disney in a shockingly bad light. Okay, and so this is a brutal teardown of Disney. Okay, it's both comedy, it's philosophy, and it is an absolutely shocking, brutal teardown of Disney. Okay, the company. All right, and it's air quotes fiction, right? Like, okay, so you're heading here, right? Now, you're like, hey, Scott, people do satire and comedy all the time, right? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So what's unusual here, right? So one, just to be clear, there's a world strand that goes between Goofy, right, and the world Goofy lives in. The Disney character. Where's the world strand? There's now a world strand between the Disney character Goofy and the show Atlanta. Atlanta is its own distinct world, and Atlanta was made by Fox. That was the distinct company, okay? And Goofy is owned by Disney. That was a distinct company. Watch where we're going. Pay attention, right? So the world strand is between Atlanta, the world of Atlanta, the show Atlanta, right? Which, yeah, this is so confusing, right? Because there's an actual city named Atlanta, right? But I'm talking about the show Atlanta, right? And Goofy, the world Goofy lives in, okay? Which arguably is the Disney world, right? The primary world of Mickey Mouse. And by the way, the show is absolutely brutal, right? This episode, this season 4, episode 9, which is called The Goof Who Stood by the Door, is brutal on Mickey Mouse. Just takes Mickey Mouse. It's savage. It is absolutely savage the way it deals with Mickey Mouse, right? It says some pretty terrible things about Mickey Mouse, the character, right? All right, now, none of that's unusual. A lot of people mock Disney. A lot of people mock Mickey Mouse. A lot of people mock Goofy. Here's where it gets odd, right? This is a world strand. It's been created by the creatives, right? And the suits check the box and send it out the door as a product. Season 4, episode 9 is a very real, very distinct product. Who's it sold by? It's sold by Disney. Why? Because Disney acquired Fox's shows and movies. Right? Yes. This is incredibly unusual. Okay? Yeah, so it really is just, it's hard to explain how unusual this is. It is truly incredible. Okay. All right. So, yeah. All right. So basically, you have this situation where, yeah, you have this situation where you arrive at this incredibly unusual spot where Disney is actually creating a world strand, selling it as a product, but that world strand has been made by creatives, but the suits are like, wait, we just sold a product that massively denigrates everything we've been building in our main company for literally 100 years? Or actually 80 years? And the answer is yes. Yes, that's exactly what happened, right? So Disney sells a product that you could buy that savagely treats Mickey Mouse, Disney itself, and quite literally rewrites its own history and what happened with roles in its company. That is outrageously unusual and an extremely clear example that the left hand is doing one thing that the right hand is completely unaware is actually occurring. Why would they be ignorant? Why would this situation happen? The incredible momentum of capitalism. And this cannot happen in any country in the world but America. But we ball out. We sure do. All that is a picture of what's happening on Dungeons & Dragons. And it will land in the Supreme Court 20 years from now. I'm very confident of that. All that is my humble opinion. I am super excited to hear your humble opinion on this. Do you know of examples where this has happened that I haven't seen? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.